Solemn Simulacrum's back! Alright, so last time Solemn Simulacrum was in Standard, I played a deck I called Sad Robot Army. The entire strategy was to play Solemn and copy it as many times as possible. It used control in the early game to stay alive, and then would hopefully just create an army of 2/2 value that would overwhelm the opponent. It was really fun to have a giant army of 10 2/2s that are swinging in at the opponents. Ridiculous and not very competitive, I know. It of course wasn't a top tier deck or even a second or third tier deck, but I would play it in gold/platinum rank and I would win every now and then in a very fun display. Eventually, Solemn rotated out of Standard and I kinda lost inspiration to play Standard soon after that. Now that our sad robot is back, I wanted to see if a deck like this could win any games whatsoever in today's metagame. Or is Solemn simply not good enough to win in Bronze League? Like, this is the lowest league you can play on MTG Arena. What inspired this video is a few days ago played a white-blue-green deck that was trying to use this Solemn copy strategy, and it completely failed. I lost 12 games in a row, but now I've created 3 more, a little bit more focused and maybe a little bit better decks that I think might do a little better. One is trying to emulate the original blue-black control deck from multiple years ago. One is a green-blue ramp deck that hopefully just gets Solemn out a little bit faster. And the last one focuses on Delney, doubling up enter the battlefield triggers. Now that we've got our 3 decks, we will be playing 5 games with each of them and going over whether they just got trampled and how good the opponent's decks were, and see if we rise out of bronze by the end of this. First, let's see how the blue-black control deck does. Game 1, we had a pretty good opening hand. We played against a poison deck, and while we did make some good value plays on turn 3 and 4, even playing Solemn Simulacrum, the poison deck, with its cheap spells just proliferating our numbers, was able to take us out in the end. So, we lost game 1. On to game 2. In the second game, my opponent was YYMX and while my opening hand wasn't the best, it did have some early card advantage, and so I decided to keep it. We ended up playing a more grindy game against a dinosaur deck that ran Case of the Locked Hothouse for card advantage, and I didn't have any removal for that card, so I just had to let my opponent have that, and we had to see how it would play out. Eventually, his dinosaurs and other creatures ended up being a little bit too strong, and I just had to let them deal damage to my face, because life is a resource. Luckily, my instant speed spells were able to copy some of his stuff, and I got a lot of value out of that. The match culminated with me bouncing his creature right before I was going to fight. This value play was enough to stabilize my board and keep me alive with the card advantage I would have from Mazemind Tome, and because of that, the opponent decided to concede, leading to the first victory I've had with Solemn Simulacrum in Standard in 3 years? Let's see how Game 3 went. Based off of the opponent's avatar, it looks like Asney is also playing a dinosaur deck, but we'll just have to see what cards they play. Yes, this is definitely a dinosaur deck, and based off of our Deep Cavern Bat, this is definitely a dinosaur deck. But with our removal, we might have a fair shot, and we even get a backup return from the grave Ashnod. Oh, but that's a Bonehorde Dracosaur. Yeah, we might not fare so... That's a second Bonehorde Dracosaur, and we don't have any removal for either of them. And it's making our 5 mana activated ability to get a tapped 3/3 look a little bit sad. So a few turns later, I decided to call it good and gave my opponent the game. Well, let's see how Game 4 goes. Game 4, I went up against a very quick Enchantress deck, and I just didn't draw the right cards. I didn't have the early game removal. I had about 1 bounce spell, which I used on their biggest thing. But overall, the game just went by way too quickly for me. And so, now we go to Game 5. Game 5, I ended up going against the Sauce 808. And they were playing a mono-black discard deck, which did very well at picking apart my opening hand. Numerous bats, this one salamander, and then even Liliana eventually. I'm not using it as a complete cop-out, but I did draw 9 lands out of 15 total cards, and so the game just kind of went in their favor. I drew an Archpriest of Shadows, but on an empty board state that doesn't even matter, especially when the opponent just has a Liliana that they can ultimate, or -2 to kill, ending the game there. So, with the first deck, that is blue-black control Solemn Simulacrum, going 1 and 5, it's not looking that bright for Solemn. But hopefully the next deck can do better. This one is the Ramp Solemn. Let's see if getting Solemn a few turns earlier will make a difference. In the first match, we kept a slightly risky opening hand because our Armored Scrapgorger was removed, and we seemed to be playing against some sort of mono-red mice and lizard deck from Bloomburrow. But we got a beefy blocker out, and we got Solemn Simulacrum, which they immediately removed. But don't worry, we got a second Solemn Simulacrum out. This is exactly what I want to be doing, casting Solemn Simulacrum. We then cast Aether Channel to keep our board pretty wide, and then eventually we got to Doppelgang, and we got 4 copies of Solemn Simulacrum. With this presence, our opponent conceded, making us win our first game with blue-green ramp. Let's see what happens in the next ones. Feeling good about the first game's performance, I went into the second match with high expectations when I met this artifact animation deck, using Case of the Filched Falcon. Say that 5 times fast. I used my joint exploration to try to get some value, but it paled in comparison to when they made their clue token a 5/4 with Zephyr Glyph. And then they used Unctist Retrofitter, and I tried to copy it so that I could make my map token into a 4/4 as well to defend, but their Haywire Might was there, and it exiled my token. Now, with no board state and 1 life, I conceded the game. On to game 3, I guess. Alright, on game 3, there's one word to describe why we win, and that is bounce. We use Aether Channeler to bounce their 1 threat, which is Glissa, and then turn 4, we play Solemn Simulacrum. And their Glissa, destroying it, that's exactly what we want. We get that extra card draw. And then on turn 5, we have 6 mana, so we bounce their Glissa back to hand and play our own 3-drop of Sentinel of the Nameless City for that little value. And then, the next turn, we do some more setup, Solemn. It's a great chump blocker, but we keep it because we have Doppelgang. We use the 2 triggers from Aether Channeler to bounce their Glissa and their Annex, and then we get some more lands, and by this point, the opponent gave up, which is great for us, because we had another Doppelgang in hand, so they don't even know the worst. But we ended up winning, and going on to Game 4 with a 2-1 record. So let's see what happens. Alright, Game 4, we have a slightly bad hand, so I take a mulligan, and it looks like we're up against mono black, so let's see if we do better this time. It's not discard mono black, it's more of just generic value mono black, which means that they are going to sadly be running Sheoldred. And Solemn, it's good, but Sheoldred really makes it feel a little bit worse, especially when you compare that they're both 4 mana spells. It kind of takes me back into reality of, yeah, Solemn's just not that good compared to some of today's cards of 2024 and 2023. Oh well. Hopefully we can turn it around with Game 5 and make a winning record? That would be swell. Now, Game 5 was a little more interesting. The opponent wasn't using very good cards. It just gave me a weird feeling once he played a 4-mana 4/3 with Reach as one of the cards that are in his deck. Which made me think, maybe this is a starter deck, or maybe this is someone new to Arena playing with whatever cards they find interesting. I am in bronze after all. This very well might be the case. But that's a victory! The deck's 3-2, baby! Woo-woo! Alright, next we gotta move on to Delney and the Solemn Enters deck, where it's all about entering the battlefield. To save some time, I'll recap all of the games fairly quickly. The first game, I played against an Outlaws deck, and my enter the battlefield value was just a little bit too much, and the opponent ended up conceding when they had no cards left in hand. In the second game, I played against the starter Rakdos deck from Foundations, and I was unable to stop Alicia Who Laughs at Fate. I didn't have the right removal at the time, and the value she got was just overwhelming, and it's what defeated me. Solemn lost to a starter deck, so now I have one loss on this one. Game 3 was against a Jeskai Go Wide Tokens deck. This was the board state when I started my third turn. With no board wipes in my deck, I lost. Game 4, I played against a Boros aggro deck. I ended up gaining life with various creatures to survive, and I had Delney out to have a ton of fun plays. I want to show this one moment at the end of the game. I did this cool play where I took my own creatures after the opponent protected their Mabel. Then I sacrificed the bodyguard to get my creatures enter the battlefield effects again. The opponent conceded after that play. And game 5, I lost to a mono red deck. It wasn't even the meta red deck, but it still beat me, leaving the Delney deck at a 2-3 record. So, overall, I think there is a way to make Solemn Simulacrum work in Standard. Not a competitive Standard, gosh no. It's way too old and outdated for that. But in a low rank, like Gold or Platinum, and with a better deck builder than myself, I bet my sad robot army deck could be alive again. But let's be real, it probably will be carried by much better cards like Doppelgang. Thank you for watching this video about Solemn Simulacrum. If you like Solemn Simulacrum, you gotta subscribe if you want to get that basic land out of your deck and onto the battlefield tapped. And don't forget to sacrifice and draw a card if you liked the video. Goodbye!